I'm Peter Williams. I work for Welsh Assembly in the Department for Economy and Transport in the parts of the Assembly which deals with ICT exploitation and trust and security, which is where eCrime Wales sits in. And I'm going to talk to you this morning about some of the external threats to your organisation and some of the internal threats as well. I've called it Just One Click, and you'll kind of click as to why I call that at the end of the presentation. And it's more really about how people and staff in particular just click on links without taking into consideration what they're actually doing. But first of all, why do we have these bad guys? And I always start with these two slides because I think it's just a wake-up call, a reminder to us all. Why do we have these bad people creating chaos, if you like? And it's quite simply, it's for the money. They're doing it because there's lots and lots of money to be made. In fact, a US Treasury advisor said that there's more money in e-crime than there are in the world's drugs trade. And that was Valerie McNiven, and she said that in 2005. I wonder what she'd be saying today. There's an element of fun, challenge, vengeance, current economic climate, people are being made redundant. Are they stealing your company database, setting up their own business or going off to another company? That happens all the time. Recognition, espionage, IP theft, happens all the time. Don't think just because you're a small company in Wales that the Chinese, the Russians, or whoever else, the Indians, are not interested in your products or service. They are, if it's going to safeguard the economic well-being of their own country. And then we've got cyber warfare. That's another reason. The Stuxnet worm that's infected the Iranian nuclear program. So you have these people creating stuff for the following reasons, but predominantly what's driving it is profits. There's a lot of glamorization on hacking in general. You just simply go onto YouTube and type in a few keywords and you'll find plenty of kind of videos. They make it look a little bit easier than what it is, but as Les showed this morning, once you've got things set up, it really is quite easy to get people's personal information. You've even got a class of hackers. I won't go through them all, but ones to note particularly are the white hats. Now, those are the type of hackers who try and find loopholes in systems, and they inform the good guys, so the Microsofts, the Apples, and so on, just to say your software that you've released has actually got some vulnerabilities that we've identified. You need to close them up. Then you have black hats, who are the bad guys, so they will share their secrets with the gangs, and sometimes these secrets will go on for months and months without people ever realising that there is a vulnerability. And then you've got grey hats who kind of sit on both camps, depends who pays best on the day. It really is like that. Whenever there's something in the Middle East or whatever, like protest, you tend to see a lot of hacktivists coming on the scene. And they will hack into websites for the purpose of getting a political message across. There is a website called Zone H. I don't recommend you go to that because you can get yourself infected. But that kind of shows websites that have been hacked kind of in real time. It's quite scary. It is, almost like the world of cyber warfare. And to kind of prove that there is this kind of external threat, myself, creative director there, behind the camera, Brian Carroll, and Professor Andrew Blythe from Glamorgan University, set out to do what the professor said was the world's first academic situational awareness trial. And what we did was plant laptops with sensors, if you like, for want of a better word, for the techies. It was called Snort, which is like an intrusion detection system. And we planted it across businesses in Wales. We also kind of tweaked the firewall so it would let traffic of a certain nature go to the laptop. And then once that laptop was detecting an inbound attack, it would then let the University of Glamorgan know. as you can see there in the picture. By the way, that's not University of Glamorgan. That's BT's Network Management Centre in Oswestry. I put it there because it looks cool. But I have been there as well, and it is a cool place. So what was the results of this trial? You know, were we really being attacked? Were they automated? Were they manual? You know? Well, basically, according to that map, the bad guys were from China, but many will say, well, actually, the Chinese, yes, they're bad, but they're not that bad. Is that the Russians tend to use the Chinese servers to attack us, and then you've got Germany, Italy, America, Colombia. So during the window of 5 days that we had these sensors running, there was 25,000 targeted attacks, even though we had like just 16 network ports, because in a firewall you have 65,535 ports, but we only had 16 of the, as the professor said, interesting ones opened. And so, you know, we detected coordinated attack from countries, specifically targeting supply chains, small companies supplying defence contractors and so on. We saw quite a huge interest, shall we say, in those type of companies, but less on maybe some of the larger companies. Maybe that's because it's something down with the ISP, or that the bad guys know that they've got intrusion detection system, they've got, you know, really good security, and they try and find other ways to get in. I don't know. There was a lot more of there's a lot more data behind this. But one thing is for sure, yes, lots of them was automated, but some of them were actually manual attacks. We know that for sure. And there was even what they call brute force attacks against the sensor-equipped laptops. Luckily, we had, I think, 13, 14 character passwords on them, all kinds of characters, which you could never remember. And I don't think anything got through. But, you know, just in a space of 5 days, it's quite shocking. But anyway, never mind what's happening on the, you know, outside the organisation, what's happening on the inside, because this is a threat. We find 60 to 70% of breaches tend to start from within an organisation. Now, that could be somebody clicking on a link, introducing something to the organisation, or it could be, you know, agency staff, contractors, whatever, planting little keyloggers behind people's computers, or installing malware and so on. And then there's you know, how kind of click happy are you with the old mouse? Because for computers, they can be frustrating. They never go fast enough when we want them to do something. Social engineering, the art of, or the act of manipulating people into performing actions or divulging confidential information. Hardest form of attack to defend because hardware and software alone can't stop it. And there are people who are paid to go into companies to try and break in. I think the best trick that the chap was saying, a chap called Peter Wood, I don't have a picture of him on the slide, unfortunately. He's an interesting chap. And he has a 100% success rate. And a good trick is to go and have a conversation with somebody while they're having a smoke outside. You know, and they might have a, you know, security tag like this. They just let them in, follow them through, you know, ask how their weekend was, and in they go. So moving on to kind of clicking on links, and I've got a bit of a case study coming up surrounding Facebook, but I just want to raise awareness of the stuff. Particularly the difference between today's malware, as it's kind of commonly, the term is commonly used, as opposed to yesterday's viruses. You know, viruses, I remember viruses 20 years ago and more, where they were really just designed to cause a bit of, you know, inconvenience to one's machine. You know, that's not the case these days. It's designed to exploit your computer's power. It's very sophisticated, and it does form part of the criminals' business model. But it's down to the clicking of the links, particularly in social networks, as I'll highlight in the next few slides, that kind of aids its speed across the internet. So just a snapshot here. It's designed to work for their creators, can form part of a botnet, which is a collective. You might not necessarily notice it. You know, computers these days are very, very powerful. And what it can do is embed itself in trusted operating systems and files. So your antivirus might think, it might even warn you, but because you see Internet Explorer, you might think, oh, that's safe, there's not a problem, but it might have hidden itself in the program itself. You know, it can do all kinds of stuff from you know, getting screen grabs to keyboard logging, whatever. I don't know if anybody heard of the Configure malware doing the rounds a couple of years ago. Well, the way it's spread was it's two ways really. Commonly it was with these USB key fobs, so people stuck in an infected USB fob into a machine, and they'd get this up. Now, you'll notice here, install or run a program, and it says open folder to view files. But then you've got open folder to view files here as well. So which one is the genuine one? Well, it's obviously this one. But lots of people clicked on this, which was a program, and of course they got infected. And then the other reason was servers hadn't been updated, apparently. I'm not too sure on that. And so basically that's how Configure spread. Again, it was down to people clicking, putting things into devices and clicking on links like this that caused the spread of that. And then we have poison screens, as they're called, where you see adverts which fool users into buying fake antivirus software. This happens all the time, a scareware, as it's called. We've also seen adverts on Google, looking pretty legitimate adverts, which have led to download of malware, and lots of people have fallen for this scam. Does anybody know or have been a victim? Well, I'll ask, does anybody know of someone who's fallen victim to downloading fake antivirus? Yeah.
We had what looked like a legitimate email come through from one of our postal providers, that we send parcels out every day. Clicked on it, and within 3 hours it dismantled my computer. Luckily, our network was safeguarded, but within 3 hours my laptop had just completely gone. And then within 24 hours we had another thing come through saying, do you want to update your...
Yeah, antivirus, and click here. And a lot of the people I know who've fallen for it, they've followed the instructions, and it says it's going to take £20 out, when in fact it takes a bit more than that, £80 in most cases. And a lot of these people have paid via debit card. Of course, my advice is anything you buy online, irrespective of the amount, always pay by credit card, because you've always got that buffer to kind of sort the issue out. And also, if you have to freeze your credit card account, and it's just freezing your credit card account and not your current account. You know, so just bear that in mind when you're. So here's a kind of example screens, and I did have I've got a Google fake ad here somewhere, but it's very, very easy. Does anybody use AdWords at all? It's very, very easy to set up, and yeah, you know, you can advertise your website. You know, so it comes up as, you know, sponsored links and then your website address, but your destination address can be different. You can put another address in there. And of course, from an e-criminal's perspective, if they're going to spend $10 and they're going to get $1,000 returns, good investment. Alan Ralsky, convicted of spamming and running stock manipulation scams in America. What he did was pay hackers $10 for each PC they could bring under his control. And what he was doing was then using those PCs as part of a botnet to send out spam to tell people buy these shares, buy these shares. Shares were artificially inflated. Ralsky then sells the share at the right price, and then everybody realizes it's a scam and they lose out. But you know, this stuff happens. You can see why they're doing it, and they're upping the ante all the time. So be aware of these. These are all fake poison screens, as it's referred to. going down to getting emails of people and stuff. First of all, never. I should change that from don't always. I should never trust your malware antivirus scanner. Full stop. It's there, it's doing a job, but I wouldn't trust it. And you'll see more the reasons why in the next few slides. But if somebody's sending you a link, is it out of character? Just think about that. And you know, take the mouse just above the link to see if it's giving, you know, an address you're expecting. That can give some clues as well, you know. But anyway, moving on to a case study concerning Coopface, which is a piece of malware that was thriving using social networks, and it's basically a botnet. So one Sunday evening, and this is true, this is based on kind of me, I guess. I was at home and I was logging onto Facebook. Then I get an email. I'd had an email actually on the Saturday, but I was checking it on the Sunday. So he's a colleague of mine, Rhys Morris, and he sends me this message on Facebook. And he says, "Wow, is that really you on that video?" Well, instantly I knew Rhys wouldn't send me a message in English, he'd probably send me in Welsh, so I thought, well, there's something dodgy here. But anyway, I'll kind of go along with it to see what happens, and then I'll take screenshots and just see what happens. So I click on the link, ignoring all our advice. And it takes me to this page, which, okay, it's trying to download the latest version of Flash, which is now trying to download a file. But of course, I was eagle-eyed. It did help that I'd been on a malware investigation course the week before. I thought this was a bit sneaky. It's saying I haven't got Flash. I keep my computer up to date. I listen to Iestyn Puw's advice on keeping my computer up to date with all the latest updates and patches. And in the corner, you can't see it really that clearly, but there's a few spelling mistakes in YouTube and stuff, so it kind of looked dodgy. And that IP address actually was a residential customer of service provider Comcast, who residing in Florida, so it's kind of, yeah, that's dodgy. So I've downloaded it, my antivirus has scanned it, I get no message. So for somebody who doesn't know what they don't know, they would have carried on with this, right? And of course, the very sneaky trick as well, the file has also got colours resembling MSN to make it kind of more user-friendly. Yeah. So what happened next? I didn't execute the file because that would be going too far and it would be being just stupid. So what I did, I uploaded it to this website called Jotty. There's another website called Virus Total, where you can submit suspicious files to this website and they will scan it. Now, suspicious files can also include infected PDF documents, but just be aware what kind of PDF documents you're uploading to this website, because you don't know where it's going to end up. So files that you're happy, I guess, for the whole world to get access to. So anyway, this was submitted up to Jotty. And this is bearing in mind now that there's only one day after I had this email, okay, this was a Sunday night, that only 2 out of the 21 antivirus companies said it was a dodgy file. AVG was one, what's the other one? Dr. Web. And I don't, you know, I'm not recommending or endorsing any I don't trust any of them, to be honest with you. But anyway, moving on to 3 days later, and 13 said, oh, it's a dodgy file. And then soon after, the browsers then started saying, oh, it's an attack site. Yeah. You see, because there is no, with this type of attack, you know, the speed of getting it distributed is what it's all about before the antivirus companies can actually do something about it, you know, a zero-day attack. So what would have it done had I run this piece of malware on my machine? So I'm going to try and explain all of this, so just bear with me. First of all, it would have tried to propagate itself to all of my other friends. So that's what it does first. It spread itself out to all my friends, so they would have had the same message. Then it would have tried to hijack my search results. Now, bearing in mind, it may or may not be successful at doing this. It depends on how up to date your browser is, or operating system, and so on. So all kind of factors to take into account. But this would be the worst case scenario, what it would do. So it'd try and manipulate my search results, probably listing, so I'd be searching for a subject and it'd probably list dodgy sites, and I click on it and it's trying to download more rubbish onto my machine. Then as it's kind of, I don't know, creating email accounts or Facebook accounts, whatever, it decides, because it cannot read these capture characters, what it does is lock another infected user's computer on the other side of the world. They get a screen like this, and it basically says you've got to type in those characters to unlock your machine, which they do. Meanwhile, the malware then has the characters to then progress with their Hotmail account or whatever. You with me on that? Yeah? So very, very sophisticated. This is another example. Downloader. It tries to, push open those, fake poison screens, those fake antivirus screens. It causes my machine then to be a web server. So I'm not the person in Florida hosting this stuff anymore, I'm the person in West Wales. So I'm having that hosted on my home PC. Then if I've got any expensive software, computer-aided design, any Adobe, any expensive software, it'll nick the keys, the license keys for those, and put it onto these dodgy websites where you can buy the software for £1. And if you're using the saved forms feature in the browsers, in certain browsers, where it remembers your details, so when you're typing in forms, it'll steal all of that information as well, which is dangerous. And then it also manipulates your DNS settings on your computer. What that means is, when you dial a phone number, the telephone exchange routes you to the person you're trying to phone. Fine. DNS does the same kind of job, except if somebody's changed the DNS settings, rather than taking you to the proper barclays.co.uk site, it takes you to a fake one. So it does that as well. And all of this controlled by a command and control server, probably sitting somewhere in Eastern Europe. So yeah, quite scary, really. So the message is, think before you click on that link, and don't necessarily trust your antivirus provider. So what should you do as businesses? Well, first of all, particularly with social networks, because it's quite a big subject, is control who has, if you want to use and embrace social networks, people are using social networks more and more to find information. It's plausible to say in one day it'll overtake Google. It's plausible to say that. And then, of course, you've got to think of your web presence. Do you let members of staff post stuff on Facebook about your company? Do they have access to Facebook? You really should restrict it to, just a few numbers, to be honest with you, not so that everyone has access. But also, have acceptable use policies, as Les was saying earlier. Very, very important to have them. Because if something does happen and you haven't got staff who've signed up to the acceptable use policy, then you're covering yourself from unfair dismissal cases and so on. Being aware, turning up to breakfast like this, I hope will make a difference to you, because being aware of the threats does help minimise the risk, but being aware, of course, of why the threats exist, the motivations of the hackers, why they hack, why they do this thing, also helps. So be proactive, not reactive, because it will happen to you if it hasn't already. Well, we've heard it's happened to some of you already. We've got plenty of stuff on the website. It gets updated all the time. It's worth following If you're a Twitterer, it's worth following Twitter. We use that. In fact, Yestin's updating Twitter now as we speak on his iPhone, and a bit of common sense as well. Okay. So yeah, that's it pretty much from me.